Scotland. Vaccine certificates are on the way as the government tries to stop rising COVID cases. Ministers want events and larger outdoor ones. They could be in use by the end of the month. Also tonight, why your local restaurant.
I had a phone call yesterday from an agency I haven't heard for years, and they offered me a shift twice.
Are in demand, but there are huge and Steve Clarke's squad gets ready to face Denmark in the first of 3 World Cup qualifiers. Hello, I'm Laura Miller. You might have already used one. Vaccine. Until now, there's been no uniform requirement to show that here. Certification scheme for entry to a range of venues and events, including nightclubs. A warning.
Now, if the proposal is passed, customers will need to show they've been concerning and blamed the Delta variant implications of vaccine passports. But the First Minister argued a limited introduction of vaccination certification
can have a role to play.
The leader of the Scottish Conservatives warned against more.
Our NHS is nearing breaking point too. People can't see their GP in person, they're waiting hours on end for an ambulance, and they're being told to stay away from A&E departments, and even if they get
keep ourselves safe. This is something that needs to doing, or as we heard today, we may see a reversal of those freedoms that we have.
I just don't feel like there should be like a passport.
I think it's fair to keep everyone safe because all the people.
Status, you've had to ask for a paper.
We absolutely feel like we're, just frankly being to get vaccinated.
Parliament will vote on the proposals next.
Hopefully everything else will remain on track, and we're going to go now to our science correspondent Laura Goodwin from the Mass Vaccination Centre in Aberdeen. Laura, how are these certifications going to actually work then?
Yeah, and we should point out actually work, well, as Katrina outlined in her pack, that if you've been travelling recently, any means the only country doing this. Israel have had vaccine passports in place for about 6 months. Ireland, France, Italy using them too, and Farmers Minister stressing that wasn't her intention here in Scotland by any means. They would be used for nightclubs and large, for those who haven't been vaccinated to act as an incentive to vaccine.
Yeah, so staying with vaccines, the body which advises on who gets vaccinated.
We've been saying that we've been waiting for this information about a booster campaign, or perhaps a small group, a relatively small group of people who are going to be offered UK-wide who are severe. No decision on children or boosters.
Fans too. There are 5 stadiums in Scotland that have more than 10,000 seats.
Governing bodies were alerted to this earlier this morning. I'm told there was surprise, there was anger. It's not going to affect everyone, but stadium, of course, here in Glasgow for Scotland games. Now, what the Scottish Government are saying is this will be they're looking for top. Caught up with the SPFL's Chief Executive, Neil Doncaster.
is clearly well meant and is clearly designed to help the country deal with the pandemic, which of course we understand, but the speed of the announcement.
Of course, what can be done to get into these grounds, of course. For those who don't want to get the vaccine, there are exemptions, children of course, and those Rangers is one of the other clubs that I mentioned earlier on. You've all expected to get your money back. Among players in Scottish football at the moment is from a pretty angry Scottish football and a Scottish...
OK, lots of questions, lots to get used to. Thanks, Chris. 6,170 new cases were recorded. 11.5% of tests came back positive. Meanwhile, just under 2,400 people had the first dose of the vaccine yesterday. The total's now more than 4.1 million. And more than 10,000 people had the second jab. Almost 3.7 million people are now fully vaccinated. Well, last week, more than 1/3 of COVID there'll be a wider booster campaign. We know that cases have been rising in young people since the return of schools. Their study is based on the last academic year when isolation rules were much stricter. Here's our education correspondent, Lucy White.
In the last academic year, hundreds very few of them got the virus. 5.2% of pupils who were in contact went on to develop COVID within 2 weeks. The number was 2.3%.
We were hoping, I think, that the
speak to stakeholders about how they're being implemented to see.
And just to let you know, in that piece speaking where Andreen Bamford from the EIS union up, in the words of the First Minister herself, is significant. But was it expected?
It was in a way, but it also wasn't. This is very significant. This will have to be done with the high case numbers and to encourage the remaining number of young people to get vaccinated. Hints convinced, but as we've been seeing, some of the interested parties seem a bit shocked by the sudden introduction.
OK, so how's this all playing out politically then?
Boris Johnson, his government down south, is pursuing a similar scheme. The Lib Dems are very against this. They say this raises in our lives. The most interesting aspect, the Scottish Greens. Now, they had been opposed.
OK, thank you, Andrew. OK. Of Kabul to Taliban.